This video is going to be showing the use of the enset engraving system. It can be used for stone setting, engraving, hammering, and I'm going to be doing a demonstration of bead setting, bright cutting, or pave work, if you will. What I'm using here is a piece of phosphor bronze. I've chosen that because it's a harder material than normal brass. It cuts and acts a lot like gold, and it's capable of having and holding a nice bright cut, unlike brass oftentimes is, and some of your other bronzes. So it's good for that part of the demonstration. I've already drilled and opened the holes up. These are for 1.6 millimeter stones. And I'm just going to go ahead and start demonstrating, and I'll be talking as I do that, explaining what's happening. So I'm going to start with my initial bright cut. Now the style of setting that I'm doing here, all of your cutting is done before you place the stones in. First you drill the holes, open them to fit the stones, and then go ahead and do all your cutting and then place the stones in. There's a lot of advantages to this style of setting as well, but it really doesn't matter whether you use the traditional method of putting the stones in and raising beads. That can be done just as well, and the tool can help you a lot with that also. The graver that I'm going to be using for the bright cutting is a narrow graver shaped much like an onglet, but I prefer the flat sides rather than the curved sides like an onglet has. So I just grind and polish my own. And this is high-speed steel. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start and make the initial bright cuts. Now the enset lets you go faster or slower just by simply pressing the pedal. You can control the speed. The power is controlled by three different ways. One will be to increase pressure. The other is to use a different striker head. The system comes with 3 striker heads. All have different weights. And the one I'm using right now is actually the lightest of the 3, and it has plenty of power for this kind of work. The second way, of course, is to increase pressure, and then the other way is to make an adjustment here with our front end. And there'll be more about this and adjustment of the tool in other videos. So right now I just want to give you the parameters that I'm using. You'll notice that the tool cuts forward, and when I come to the edge of the hole, it doesn't try to jump down in the hole, which is something that I had a difficult time with some of the other systems that I've used in the past. Now, I could make this bright cut deep enough in the first pass, but I'd like to generally do a couple of passes and take my time and really keep things controlled as I'm working on them. So I'm going to make a second pass here and go a little bit deeper. Like any kind of cutting or engraving, you always have to do your back cutting. A lot of what we do with bead setting and bright cutting pave work is really a form of engraving. So you can see I can really take my time cutting, making sure that things are the way I want them. And of course I can go faster if I choose. I can anticipate the end of the cut and slow down so not that I don't overrun my cut and then pop it out in the usual fashion. Alright, so there's the initial bright cuts. I'm going to go ahead and do the ends. The ends and doing the corners is something that people often have a harder time doing. But being able to go slow and watch how the tool's cutting, making sure that it's following the path that I want it to. And you know, the fact is that I'm controlling the tool to go when I want it to go, as opposed to starting to go and then trying to keep up with the tool. So that's, you know, again, another big advantage. All right, and I will I'll do a little bit more cutting on that later. All right, so now the way I do this is the next step then is to take this excess metal here out. But what I'm going to be doing is using a single common prong to hold two stones at the same time. And so I need to get rid of all this flash and extra material. The way that I do it is to use a flat graver. It's polished on the bottom and on the top. And I come in and hold it at the same angle as my bright cut. And from about the center of this sort of fishtail shape that's left, and just cut down into the hole, which will remove the excess. I go a little bit more here, and I'll do that all the way down on one side, and then of course turn around and come back the other way, and then of course back to the other side again. So let me zoom out and continue that. It's interesting because whenever I'm trying to demonstrate and I get zoomed in really close so that you can see it better, it's actually more difficult sometimes to do some of the cutting. It's actually easier not to be too zoomed up. So Alright, so now we have our beginnings of our prong or bead, if you will. Our next step then is to cut the center out. Normally I would do that with a burr, usually a cylindrical burr, but I have found that with the enset, because of the cutting action that I can make it produce, which is this very snappy kind of a cut, I can actually cut through that and not have any problems. What I use to do this is a very wide round tool, and this one I made from an old burr. Of course you can just use a commercially made one if you prefer. And I'll be able to, because if you look at this reciprocating action, I'll be able to cut through that and not bend or move any of this portion of the prongs that'll remain, which is again one of those things that with other systems I've used happens. So now you can do that in a couple of cuts like this. You can come in and cut it all in one if you want, and you'll see that it'll snap through, and you notice we haven't disturbed our prongs at all, and we have a nice bright rounded bottom there. Oftentimes what happens is the tool kind of pushes too much and doesn't really cut until the material starts to really move and bend. So again, it's the design of the way that the tool cuts that allows this to be done. You can go back the other way if you want as well, you know, to make sure that you've got a nice consistent bright cut. You could also come in from the top and do it at an angle down into the hole and then turn around and come back the other way. There's a lot of ways that can be done, and that would basically all be personal preference. So the next thing that I have to do is to clean the debris. Normally going back in with my burrs, and then put my stones in, and then I can show you the process I use for pushing them over.